corruption is of interest to me if it's a misuse of public office for private gain, where a choice on merit is bypassed and it is given to someone who didn't deserve it, but because he was in a position to pay money, therefore he was able to get it. So in a sense what you're saying is that instead of optimizing your choice as a public servant or a public official, you are sub-optimizing these choices. And in the process, you are enriching yourself. That harms society directly when the best choices are not made, when the optimization doesn't take place in the allocation of resources. There are people who think that if somebody gets money, well, that's corruption too. For example, the Congress General Secretary Digvijay Singh said that Ramdev is also corrupt because he accepts money in cash, and that's bound to be black money. Now, Ramdev certainly doesn't misuse any public office to get that donation. And if you start saying using this as a possible definition, then if a corrupt person goes in a taxi with a lot of cash in his pocket and pays the fare in cash, then you are saying that taxi driver is also corrupt. Now, therefore, this will become a very loose definition. Rather deal with those things in under separate headings of fraud and bribery, fraud and extortion and so many other categories of crime. But as far as corruption is concerned, we should restrict it to the misuse of public office. The 2G spectrum case is a classic case of a misuse of public office. Now, what happened really was this, that when the 2G spectrum was to be allocated, the telecom minister made an announcement on 25th September of 2007 that applications will be received only up till 1st October 2007. Now, earlier in the month, in early September, he had said anyone can apply at any time, and they will be dealt with on merit as the applications come. Now, suddenly changed it around and said on 25th September 2007 that there is a cut-off date of 1st October 2007. So there was a rush between 25th September and 1st October, and about 42 companies made an application. There were 517 applications for the whole country, because the country is divided into circles for the allocation of licenses, and separate licenses are given for different parts of the country. Now, these licenses were in such large numbers because the telecom market has become a very prosperous market, and it's a market for which there's a lot of demand. In 2001, for example, the price of spectrum was low because the total number of mobile phones which the Indians owned or had was about 40 million. In 2008, when the 2G spectrum was, the allocations were made, the licenses were given, the number of mobile phones in the country was 700 million. It's a huge market, so everybody wanted to get into it. Raja from day one was very clear, the telecom minister, that two companies must get it at all costs. One was called Swan and the other was called Unitek. Both were not telecom companies. They were actually real estate companies. But they were friends of Raja. So he wanted them to get it by some means or the other. when he announced that on 25th September that the cutoff date will be 1st October, on that day he made sure that these two, Swan and Unitech, had already applied on that day. And then all the others had applied between 21st, 25th and 1st. On the 10th of January, that's the whole month of October, November, December, so more than 3 months, he brought out another press release, this time only in the website of the telecom company, telecom ministry, where he said that now I have decided that only those who applied on 25th of September or before will get the license. And those who applied between 25th and September and 1st October, I'll consider their case later. So he advanced the cutoff date after the cutoff date had been over and the applications had all come in. That was the first illegality. The second illegality was that he also said in the press release, which was issued at 2:45 p.m. On that day, 10th January, that only those who will bring a demand draft for rupees 1,651 crores between 3:30 in the afternoon and 4:30 in the afternoon, that is 45 minutes later, only they will be given the license. Now, and that again he said it in the website of the telecom ministry. There was chaos, there was panic, then they had to bring in bouncers, as they are called, to throw people out. But two of his favorite companies, Swan and Unitech, they were already sitting inside in his office with demand draft in their pockets. That means they had advance information. 7 other companies also had advance information. And so a total of 9 companies qualified to get the license. And this is patently illegal. In India, you cannot get a demand draft for 1 crore in less than at least 48 hours. And to expect that at 2:45 you will be informed, assuming you saw it then, and then between 45 minutes you will be able to get a demand draft for 1,651 crores, was out of the question. It's obviously some fraud had taken place. And why did he pick the price of 1,651 crores? Because that was the price of spectrum in 2001, when the market was so small. The market price for spectrum in 2008, when he gave the license, was 10 times more. And therefore, if you actually multiply the licenses given by what was charged, then you multiply it by the market price of 2008 and subtract, you will get a loss of 1,76,000 rupees. That arithmetic of CAG may have been criticized by the Communist Party government, but the fact is that that's as broad as daylight. You can make the calculation. Now the companies which got the licenses, Swan and Unitech had no hope of ever setting up a telecom company because they didn't even have a single tower. They were real estate companies. So what they did was they sold the controlling shares of their company to 2 companies, Etisalat and Telenor. Etisalat is a Dubai-based company, and Telenor is a Norwegian company, but its business is all in Pakistan and Bangladesh. So these 2 companies, they sold it for 8 times what they paid. That means 1,651 multiplied by 8. Not 10 times, which was the market price. Obviously, the other side also had to pay something. So they sold it for 8 times. Some of the companies which had already telecom infrastructure with them, they sold it for much higher percentage, for higher multiples. For example, Tata sold it to Docomo for 13 times. So as a consequence, these companies made by selling their licenses or the controlling shares of their licenses a huge windfall profit, which should have really gone to the government. But instead the private companies made it. And my estimate is that of this 1,76,000 crores lost to the nation and gained by these other companies, about 60,000 crores was the bribe that was paid and then distributed amongst important people of the government, I think Vadra also. And one by one you will see them as they go to jail who these important people are. One of the other things that, two other things were violated. There's a law, there's a regulation under the TRAI, the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, that you cannot sell your license after getting it for 3 years. That was given a go-by. And the other was a Home Ministry advisory saying that, and not in connection with the telecom, but generally there was an advisory, that no company of India, public sector or private sector, should do any business with Etisalat and Telenor, the very companies which got the telecom license. The reason given by the Home Ministry advisory was that Etisalat is suspected by our intelligence agency to be a front for the ISI of Pakistan. And that it is a fact that Etisalat is bought heavily into the Pakistan Telecom and Communication Limited, PTCL as it's called, and they have Pakistanis on their board, and vice versa. The Home Ministry advisory further said that the Indian branch of Etisalat is headed by one Shahid Balbas, who is a prominent builder. I didn't say prominently honest builder, but prominent builder, who the Home Ministry advisory said is the right-hand man of Dawood Ibrahim. And as far as Telenor is concerned, the Home Ministry advisory said that this company buys its telecom equipment from the Chinese People's Liberation Army, which equipment can also be used for cyber warfare. And that this raises a question whether if they set up towers with the help of this equipment, whether they, in times of difficulty between India and China, whether this could be used for cyber warfare and fail all the Defense Ministry computers. This is what the Home Ministry advisory said. So it was in flouting this advisory that they were permitted to sell it. So here is the case of pure misuse of office. Raja, immediately I asked the Prime Minister to give me permission to prosecute Raja, because he was not doing it himself. The Prevention of Corruption Act has a requirement that any citizen can initiate the process of law, criminal law, to prosecute somebody for corruption of a public official, provided it is sanctioned by an authority. And that authority must be the person who is responsible for his appointment or has the power to terminate his appointment. So therefore, I wrote to the Prime Minister, because ministers are made on the recommendation of the Prime Minister, and they are also dropped on the recommendation of the Prime Minister. So therefore, I wrote to the Prime Minister asking for something, giving all the documents I had, and I said that huge loss has taken place. At that time, the CBI had not begun any investigation. Nobody was. In fact, the whole thing was being hushed up. So I wrote to him saying that give me permission. He didn't reply. Then I wrote him another letter with more documents. All these documents are in my new book called 2G Spectrum Scan, which has just been published in the middle of June. And you can get it from Haran and Publications. If you want, or if you tell me after this lecture, I can give you his email. You can get. It's about 300-page book which I've written. Happy to say it sold out within the first 2 weeks. But there are some new printing that has taken place, so you will be able to get a copy. These documents have all been included in the book that I am mentioning to you. Now, I wrote to the Prime Minister. He didn't reply. Then I wrote again. I wrote 5 times. He did not reply. Well, he didn't give me sanction. And I understood why. Because he had a higher sanctioning authority above him. The permission he was not getting. So I went finally to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is empowered under the Indian Constitution that where a public authority fails to perform its statutory duty, the Supreme Court may enter, intervene, and perform that statutory duty for that person, for that authority. So I asked the Supreme Court, you please give me sanction, because the Prime Minister is in no position to give sanction. After reading my documents, the Supreme Court was quite enraged, and for the first time in our history, a notice was sent to the Prime Minister asking him to file an affidavit as to why he didn't reply to my letters. This has never happened in any country where the Prime Minister is asked to file an affidavit. It essentially means that you don't believe your word, so you got to put it in an affidavit. And if you violate, you tell untruth, it is perjury, and that is punishable. So Prime Minister filed a reply in which he showed that every letter of mine, he had written on it, very important letter, very serious matter, please advise, and his bureaucrats wrote back to him saying nothing important, please ignore the letter. Well, he nearly lost his job, the Prime Minister, on that. But I personally felt, why should he resign? After all, no one better than him is going to come anyway. So we should wait for the normal elections to change governments instead of this method. So I did not press for his resignation. But I got sanctioned. As a consequence, I went to the trial court and filed a petition. The trial court heard me and then ordered the CBI to investigate. So I went back to the Supreme Court to say the CBI is under the government. So for this case, the Supreme Court should take it upon itself to monitor the CBI. So an instruction was given to the CBI, you are not to listen to anybody, including the Prime Minister. You have to only listen to us, that is the court. I must say this change in climate in the Supreme Court has come because of a new Chief Justice by the name Kapadia, who has created a climate where judges feel empowered to get tough on issues of corruption. So CBI became independent of the government, and the process began, and Raja was arrested, and he's being kept in jail because if you let him out, he can affect witnesses. In fact, one witness was his private secretary. Private secretary is not an assistant. Private secretary is a senior government position occupied by an IAS officer, and his job is to maintain the secretariat of the minister. Private assistant is the one who does the typing and all that. He's called PA. A PS is a senior official, and it's a matter of gratification for me that there are people like that. One night at 9:30 at night, my doorbell rang. I opened it, and there was this man standing outside saying, "May I come in? I have something important to tell you." So I asked him, "Who are you?" He said, "My name is Ashirvadam Achari. I am the private secretary to Mr. Raja." So I invited him, and he was the one who explained the whole thing, that how it happened and so on. It became clear in my mind what had happened. And he later turned to be a whistleblower, and he made a deposition before the magistrate, before the trial court. And he's going to be a key witness. So I mean, these people like that should not be hurt or harmed if Raja comes out. So therefore the court has decided that Raja should remain inside. Then after that, one of the people getting the kickback, Raja didn't keep all the money. After 60,000, he kept only 3,000 crores. That's a small amount. Anyway, he distributed the others to the important people, including the president of the DMK and people in Delhi. So, in that, Karunanidhi's daughter got caught, and she is also in jail. Now, it turns out that just before leaving office, Dayanidhi Maran had got hold of one of the licensees who owned Aircell and forced him to sell it to a Malaysian Sri Lankan Tamil whose father came as a plantation worker. Now, the Intelligence Bureau reports also suggest that he used to launder LTT money, like Rajaratnam was doing out here, and giving donations to them. So he is now also resigned, and it's only a matter of 2 weeks before he also ends up in Tihar jail. Changed the cook in Tihar jail, now they're giving idlis and masala dosa. So now, I was proceeding with the matter. I filed another petition saying that now all the licenses should be cancelled because such a huge bribe has been paid. So the first way to start is to cancel all the licenses and re-auction them. The government will also get revenue. The court heard the matter, reserved orders, and these orders are awaited. I hope the court will cancel all the licenses, in which case it will have a very salutary effect. I also found while I was digging up more documents that Raja didn't make all these decisions alone. In fact, he could not make these decisions alone because a cabinet decision of 2006 had clearly laid down that the question of prices of spectrum, determination of price of spectrum, has to be jointly decided by the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Telecom. And the Minister of Finance at that time was Mr. Chidambaram. So then I got documents to find out that Mr. Chidambaram has put his signature on documents along with Raja. And Raja has also made many file notes saying that Mr. Chidambaram encouraged me to fix this price. And this is what the Prime Minister subsequently, under pressure of my documents being released to the press, said in Parliament that I could not decide anything but the price. Because the people empowered to decide were two ministers, and Mr. Chidambaram came and informed me that they have decided to fix the price at 2001. This he said on the floor of Parliament. Subsequently, it turns out that Mr. Chidambaram was also privy to the Home Ministry report saying that license should be, no business should be transacted with Etisalat and Telenor, because as Finance Minister, these documents were sent to him by the Home Ministry at that time. So it was clear that if Mr. Raja is culpable and it should be in jail, Mr. Chidambaram should not leave him alone. So therefore I have filed another petition seeking that Mr. Chidambaram be made co-accused. This was heard by the Supreme Court on 13th of May, before they went on vacation. And the final hearing will be on 24th of August. I expect one more Tamilian will go to jail. Because there is no way Mr. Chidambaram can escape having put a signature on all these documents, for which Mr. Raja is already in jail. But he will be the first Congress minister. So far only DMK ministers were there. So all this leads to what? It's a $40 billion loss. A huge amount of bribe. And of course it's sub-optimized. I mean, the best companies didn't get it. And companies that shouldn't get it got it. And the process is going on. Many more charge sheets have to come. But I would say, why is this corruption bad for the country? Because it has a multi-dimensional effect. It's not a question of Raja being enriched, or Karunanidhi being enriched, or Chidambaram being enriched, or Sonia Gandhi being enriched. That's not the question. That's the only small part of the question, rather. The big part of the question is that what use is this money put to, and how does it impact on the economy? So, there you have to see this multidimensional effect of corruption. Corruption takes place through black money, and this black money is partly sent abroad, partly kept inside. Inside it is used largely for luxury consumption goods. For instance, those who suddenly come into a lot of money, you will suddenly see that every room in their house is air conditioned. Of course, they'll get a new house too. Even the bathrooms are air conditioned in their houses. They'll get Mercedes, Lexus, all these cars which are commonplace here but very prestigious in India. They'll be suddenly buying lots of cars. They even buy a corporate jet. So you can see that they've been getting away with it because nobody was really challenging them. Now what effect it has is that the luxury goods sector's rate of return suddenly starts shooting up. Why do people build so many hotels in India? Because every hotel, particularly 5-star hotels, are full to the core. Even when there's an economic recession, it will be full. Because the rich have money, the corrupt have money, and they go and use it. So the distortion of your investment priority takes place because investment is starved out of those industries which are considered producing goods for the common man, like cloth or something like that. And it moves into the luxury goods sector. Using input-output technique, I had estimated that 70% of Indian investment goes directly or indirectly to produce luxury goods now. And that's a complete distortion of your investment priorities. It is by arbitrarily changing the market position that is possible. The second thing is that a lot of this money, because now the government has legitimized forward trading in agricultural commodities. So a lot of this money goes in to hoard the fresh arrivals of food grains, sugar, oil and so on in the market. And of course you pay the farmers in cash. There's no way you can make them accountable for that. So as a consequence, essential commodities prices, also there is those at the retail level, not at the farmers level, but at the retail level, it rises and shoots up. We have a growth rate of 9% per year in GDP, but we also have an inflation rate of 16%. Now this is an extraordinary situation because normally in economics, if the supplies increase, the prices should come down. But here, it's an abnormal situation. That's because black money is used to hoard. And once the price rises to a certain level, then the stocks are released from the godowns and the prices come down. Part of the money goes abroad and is deposited in safe havens. And then there is a new financial derivative that has been created by Mr. Chidambaram when he was finance minister. About which very little comes in the press. And that's called participatory note. Morgan Stanley and US Fidelity Investments, if you take a sack full of cash and put it on the counter and say, I'm from India and I want a participatory note. No other country issues participatory note, only India does. They will give you a piece of paper with only the amount written on it. And then you bring that to India and give it to one of the mutual funds and say, buy these stocks. So they will buy these stocks. It will be a large infusion because a lot of black money is abroad. And it comes back through this route. And the stock prices shoot up for those particular stocks. And then they sell it. They are paid in rupees for the high price of the new price of the shares. And then you take the money with your copy of your participatory note, go to the Reserve Bank and say, now please convert this all into dollars right away. And under the legislation that has been brought in, the Reserve Bank is obliged to convert it immediately to dollars. And then you take it abroad and put it back in your account there. Of course, there is a capital gains tax to be paid. For that also, the government of India has found a nice way. You go to Mauritius and set up a $1 company. And through that company, you invest in India. And because we have a lot of sympathy for the plight of Mauritians, therefore, we have a new law in our country that any capital gains in the stock market of a Mauritian company will not be subject to any capital gains tax. You and I have to pay 25%, but they don't pay anything. So if you now see foreign investment into India, you will see Mauritius at the top of the list. And America far below. I didn't know that Mauritius had so much foreign investment. Because I thought they had only beaches and gambling casinos. And suddenly I find that they are the biggest provider of foreign investment to India. It's because this round tripping takes place. So your stock market is also rigged. So you have now a situation where your investment priority, first of all, sub-optimization. That means the rate of return for the country is sub-optimized. You give non-merit or lower merit opportunities. The meritorious don't get what they deserve. Second is that your investment priorities are distorted. The third is that the inflation is artificially generated by stocking, by forward trading. And fourth is this stock market is rigged. Our stock market today is quite rigged thanks to participatory notes. There have been many demands for abolishing participatory notes. There was a Tarapura committee set up, and they had strongly recommended this should be passed. The director of the Securities Exchange Bureau of India, SEBI, who is the oversight committee for shares. And if you ordinary citizens go and buy a share, he will ask you 1,000 questions. How did you get the money? Where did you get it? And so on. But he's been barred from asking this question if you come with a participatory note. He made a statement too, that this is wrong and should not be allowed. Next day he was asked to go home. So I mean, everybody's got the message that this is some kind of sacred derivative which nobody can question. So all this is because some of the people felt, you see, that if you put money in the Switzerland bank, not only you don't get interest on your deposit, but you have to pay a service charge. So that's not fair. So therefore, this device was created by which you can earn money on your money fraud. Most of the top politicians in the country have these secret bank accounts. That's why the government is so scared to publish the names of those who have received without your effort. In Liechtenstein, there was the Germans found out that their officials were depositing money in Liechtenstein. So what they did was, they asked Liechtenstein, "You please give us this, all these accounts." Liechtenstein frankly refused. That our business revolves around the secret banking, we won't allow it. So what the Germans did is they asked the intelligence agents to go and bribe the senior most official of the Liechtenstein bank and get a CD of all the accounts which were secret accounts. And then they downloaded it and separated it by countries. So 24 countries had persons, citizens who had accounts in Liechtenstein. So they wrote to all the 24 countries that your nationals have accounts in this secret, which are illegal, and we are ready to give you. 23 countries wrote back immediately, please send it to us. Only one country did not ask. You can guess what that country is. And this matter came to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court was very angry. And finally they got the names. But they are refusing to release the names. The Supreme Court said, all right, show it at least to us. No, we won't show it to you. So in anger, the Supreme Court has now set up a special investigating team under a retired judge, a very able judge, Jeevan Reddy, to investigate this whole thing. And one of these days the names will come out. And I don't think then the government can survive. You have strange characters whose job is very ordinary and having billions of dollars in their accounts. Take the case of Hassan Ali. He's a scrap collector. He made his life as a scrap collector. Suddenly he had an account with $8 billion in it. And they are refusing to do anything about it. So it's quite clear that the top people in the country, in the political firmament, have accounts, and this is not common. The total amount of Indian money abroad in illegal banks, illegal bank accounts, is supposed to be around between $500 billion and $1.4 trillion. $500 billion can build you the world's first-class infrastructure and 100 universities. $1.4 trillion will mean that you can abolish income tax. And at least for 10 years you can run on that for your budget. So, therefore, you know, all this money needs to come back. And thanks to the alertness of a number of governments after the 9/11 terrorist attack, the UN has passed a number of laws, a number of resolutions. And now Switzerland has also passed a law which says that if there are politically exposed persons, PEP, and the government of the day, government of that country, writes only their name, we will find out whether they have an account, and if they have that account, first step we will freeze it, and then start proceedings to liquidate that account and return to the country. So Mubarak in Egypt is now, his accounts are frozen, just on a letter of the new government. Rebels in Libya wrote to Switzerland and they have frozen the accounts of Gaddafi. So now it's very easy. All the government of India has to do is send a list of all the MPs, MLAs of the country and say, as a start, please tell us which of them have accounts. That's one way of solving the problem. Another way of solving the problem is the government issues an ordinance. It need not wait for passing it through Parliament, it can do it later. I issue an ordinance that all Indian citizens' accounts are hereby nationalized. If any Indian citizen subsequently proves that these accounts were containing legal money and was legally created, then we will return that account. Of course, this government will not do that. So they will not even do the question of politically exposed persons. They are not ready to receive the names given to you by the Germans. I mean, they say, oh, we have mutual tax treaty, but the Germans got it by bribery. You didn't get it from Liechtenstein. So it's all bluff. So therefore, we know that where it is all zero. The 2G spectrum scam will not go away. The prosecution will continue. I am in it. The courts are monitoring it. And the nation is cooperating. There is a lot of euphoria about the change in climate. people for the first time, because all the time people said nothing will happen. No big person will ever be caught and so on. Now there is hope that this may happen. So now people are asking how to cure corruption. Well, one obvious way is by new laws, but I personally believe that only on one point I agree with Anna Hazare for a new law, and that is the appointment of an independent prosecutor. In America, they have that provision, and that is why when Monica Lewinsky case came, an independent, I think Donald Starr or Ronald Starr, Ken Starr was appointed. When Watergate was there, Jaworski or something like that, a well-known Harvard professor also was independent public prosecutor. This sanction which delays matters would then go. The independent prosecutor can write directly to CBI, investigate this and clear it. That part I would like the Parliament to legislate. Whether it will do it or not, I doubt it. It won't do it. Otherwise, we have to go by the longer route which I have gone so far. I mean, it will delay matters, but it will not stop matters. So this is one definitely stronger laws. And if you have even a low probability of catching people, but once you catch them, you put the book on them, then I think it will have a very salutary effect. There was around the 8th of January, there was a press conference of 2008. There was a press conference addressed in Hyderabad by Ramalinga Raju Satyam. When he said that I had fudged the accounts, I made money and I'm ready to face any punishment. I think the day before in New York, Bernard Madoff, he addressed a press conference saying that I have sinned by using Ponzi schemes to deprive people of their pension funds, and I'm ready to face any punishment. In 6 months, Bernard Madoff was convicted for 150 years and is in jail. And Ramalinga Raju, he is not convicted, but he is in an air-conditioned hospital room, having a good time. That's what we have got to change. I can show to you mathematically that even if the probability is low, if the penalty is sufficiently severe, then each person would himself feel that it is not worth being corrupt. I'll put it down on the blackboard in a summary form for those who have done a little bit of statistics. And it's like this. If B is bribe and D is the debt or the penalty you suffer, if you're caught, and if you're not caught, this is what you will get. And assuming that the probability of being caught is P, that means the probability of not being caught is 1 minus P. And therefore, the expected value from a corrupt deal is 1 minus P times B plus, is that better? All the same. Plus P, this is worse. Doesn't matter. Old-fashioned blackboard was always better. But anyway. P times D. And if D is obviously going to be negative, so to make sure that you understand it is negative, it is 1 minus P times B plus P, not plus, but minus P, absolute value of D. And let's assume that D is some lambda times B. That is some multiple of the bribe. That is the penalty you pay is some mental. Then if you replace that, you get 1 minus P B minus P lambda B. and that means what? 1 B outside, 1 minus P minus P lambda. That's what it is. And that, if I write here, will be B 1 minus 1 plus lambda P.
Yeah.
And that's expected value from a bribe. And if this is negative or 0, then no one will have the incentive to be corrupt. So that means if P is greater than or equal to 1 over 1 plus lambda. If P is greater than or equal to 1 over that, then expected value is less than or equal to 0. So let's say lambda is 99. 99 times what you took as a bribe will be a penalty. So then P greater than or equal to 1 over 100. That is, P is greater than or equal to 0.01. So even if the probability is just 1% or 1 in 100, even then, if the penalty is sufficiently strong, then obviously you yourself will not want to do it. So I think that would be a better system than saying we'll catch him and so on and so forth. It's alright, you should catch people. But you should also have a disincentive. Tomorrow Raja comes out after 7 years, he still has 3,000 crores in his pocket. So he has to, his entire property must be taken over. Maybe his family's property also should be taken over. Maybe his special friends that he has, whom he may have given a lot of money, their property should be taken over. All this seizure of properties is provided for in the law, but it's such a weak law that at present it cannot be implemented. Because China goes to an extreme and says, we will give you death penalty. So the only thing is that you will have to be fall foul of the people in power. If you are on the right side of the people in power, then no such penalty. You have to be politically unpopular in China to get the death penalty. So, but anyway, whether you should have death penalty or not, I think, if I'm not wrong, Ramdev wanted death penalty. But I don't know whether you need to go that far. If you just make them completely poor, that itself would be sufficient deterrent. So this is one way. But I will conclude with one last long-term recommendation. These are all short-term recommendations. Of course, I must tell you that some of the measures that we take through technology also leads to cutting of corruption. In the 70s and early 80s, one of the most annoying corruption was railway reservations. You could not get a railway reservation unless you bribed the ticket counterman and the ticket collector. You may be high in the waiting list, but he will somehow put somebody else on your top. In 1985, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was rather stubborn in insisting that railway reservations should be computerized. There was a lot of fun made out of that, and people said there's no electricity, but this will happen, that will happen. But in the end, that computerization of reservation has 99% wiped out the corruption in railways. Now this e-governance, this patta being given, so many things which are now, you don't have to go and salute the peon outside the office of a babu. These have made a difference. But I would say that the big difference would come if there is a cultural change in our attitudes. Over the years, we have become much more materialistic. And globalization has just added to it. Money has become now an index of social status. It's not that people who made a lot of money are happy. I have seen these ashrams of Swami Dayananda Saraswati and Sri Sri Ravi Shankar and Puttapati Sai Baba and Ramdev. Foreigners galore are there from Europe and the United States. Rich people. Recently, one well-known actress, Julia Roberts, I don't know which, Julia Roberts, or whatever. She's an Oscar winner, she's very rich, very well. She went to India, and then she found out that everybody she saw was poor but didn't have any stress on their face. She wanted to know, so somebody took her to Swamiji. And he, I don't know what lecture he gave her, but she came back and became a Hindu. And also made her husband a Hindu, and also their children Hindu. Now, it's not necessary for these values to change religion, but she decided to. And I think there is a fact that these Eastern religions like Confucianism and Buddhism and Hinduism and so on, they have explicitly reduced or devalued the status of those with money and elevated those who live a simple life. I remember when I came first as a student to Harvard to get my PhD, my classmate asked me in American, how can you accept Mahatma Gandhi as your leader? So I said, why you will not accept him in America? He said, in America, if he came, we'll put him in jail for indecent exposure. And that made me think, you see. There is something special, because you find that this simplicity, the sacrifice, was a value once upon a time in society. An India of Passian, Yuan Chuang, of Vasco da Gama, of Mark Twain, all these visitors do describe people who are very honest. So much so they won't even lock their houses. Something has changed. I think we have to learn from the West in this, that material prosperity alone will not produce happiness, and perhaps it will lead to greed. Certainly the American crisis of 2008 is entirely due to greed, and the Harvard Business School, which invented all kinds of derivatives to convert mortgages into liquid cash. So, when you want the acquisition of money, more and more, cutting corners, making money by hook or crook, all these values, they will lead to a society which is corrupt. I think we need to ponder over that question. For long term, whether the value system requires repair in India. For short term, these measures are there. The whole country in India today is greatly awakened, and I think that it will be very difficult for anyone to reverse the process that is going on. And when I return back, I come here every summer to teach at Harvard. So on 10th of August I'll return, and then I'll go from one place to another. I think a lot of people are lined up to go to what is now being called as Club Tihar, not Tihar. And so I will certainly pursue it through this logical lane. I think the country does appear to be in a situation where for the first time corruption can be dealt with, for which we can be all very optimistic. Thank you very much. P greater than or equal to 1 over 100. That is, P is greater than or equal to 0.01. So even if the probability is just 1% or 1 in 100, even then, if the penalty is sufficiently strong, then obviously you yourself will not want to do it. So I think that would be a better system than saying we'll catch him and so on and so forth. That's alright, you should catch people. But you should also have a disincentive. Tomorrow Raja comes out after 7 years, he still has 3,000 crores in his pocket. So he has to, his entire property must be taken over. Maybe his family's property also should be taken over. Maybe special friends that he has whom he may have given a lot of money, their property should be taken over. All this seizure of properties is provided for in the law, but it's such a weak law that at present it cannot be implemented. Because China goes to an extreme and says, we will give you death penalty. But the only thing is that you will have to be fall foul of the people in power. If you are on the right side of the people in power, then no such penalty. You have to be politically unpopular in China to get the death penalty. So, but anyway, whether you should have death penalty or not, I think, if I'm not wrong, Ramdev wanted death penalty. But I don't know whether you need to go that far. If you just make them completely poor, that itself would be sufficient deterrent. So this is one way. But I will conclude with one last long-term recommendation. These are all short-term recommendations. Of course, I must tell you that some of the measures that we take through technology also leads to cutting of corruption. In the 70s and early